Hello, this video is how to get set up in Maya and start creating things as quickly as possible. Maya is an unbelievably powerful and deep program. And so what I'm going to show you are the things that you'll need to do the majority of projects. And even if you go into more advanced things, these are kind of core skills you're going to need to make just about anything. I am working at the time of this recording, I'm in Autodesk Maya 2024.1. I have also installed a plugin for my Mac OS. I'm using a Mac laptop called Middle, and I have function key and left click to make middle click. If you're on a Windows laptop, you don't need it, but I have a PC, but most of the time I'm on my Mac laptop, and middle click will allow me to track around the 3D space, which you're going to need. You need to be able to, if you're working in 3D, you need to be able to move around in 3D space. Okay, so to make sure that your interface looks the same as mine, we're going to go to Window, Workspace, General, reset General to factory default. It's grayed out on mine because I just did it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is this bar over here is called the shelf. There's many different shelves that unlock different features of the software. We're going to make sure we're in the poly modeling shelf, and we're going to click on the second one over. So how do we move around this cube? On my Apple laptop, if I do the two-finger scroll in and out, I can move in and out. If I hold down Alt, I can orbit around the cube. If I hold down Alt and Function, and I have middle click installed, I can pan around the cube. All right, so zooming with two fingers, Alt is orbit, Function Alt is track. Okay, if things get kind of dodgy and you're like, where did I go? If you go to over here, there's a little cube, and you can click and drag on the cube to move to orbit as well. And then hidden under all this stuff, there's a little reset button, and you can go back to the default view. If I click on this top thing, now I'm in the select tool. So it's kind of similar to, Illustrator, Photoshop, whatever. So I can select, I can click and drag, and it's selected. And when it's selected, it changes color. Another way I can get to the select tool, if I'm doing something else, is to hit Q. Okay, so I'm going to click on the cube, and then I'm going to hit F. And what F is for frame. So if you want to frame something up in the camera, you click on it, you select it, and then you hit F. Okay, I'm gonna zoom back out a little bit. Okay, so I have my cube. So we can move around it. How do I move the cube around? Okay, so over here are our tools. If I click on this is called the transform tool, and there's little arrows to move things in different axes. If you hit Z, it undoes. If you want your axes to be a little bigger, these are a little small, you just hit plus. Over here is the rotate tool, and over here is the scale. However, if you're using Maya, there's some hotkeys you're going to want to use. So we looked at Q. W is for translate, E is for rotate, and R is for scale. And if you look at your hand on the keyboard, they're all right next to each other in a comfortable position. So the letters don't correspond to the words, they correspond to like comfort, speed and comfort. So select, translate, rotate, and scale, right? And each one of these things, if I grab it from the center, I can scale it proportionally. If I grab one of the axes, I can scale along an axis. But we're talking about moving this cube, so I can grab it up, right? And if you notice over here, as I move this cube up, you see the numbers changing. If I go to rotation and I rotate the cube, those numbers will change. Okay? And this is telling me where the cube is in the space, in three-dimensional space. So just go back again. And you can also, let's say, you know, I put it somewhere and I want to reset it. I can also just go back and set all these things to 0. So what I want to do is I want to make sure, I want to put this cube on this grid here, right on the floor. And so there's a number of ways I can do it. Number one is I can just grab this and kind of eyeball it until it's on the floor. Another way to do this is if this cube is 1 unit big on each axis, I could move it up 0.5 in the y, and that will put it on the floor. Another way to do it, though, is to move where this pivot point is. So by default, when you make a new shape, the pivot point's right in the middle. But sometimes it can be handy to move the pivot point to a different part of our geometry so that we can position it really precisely. So to move a pivot point, you hit D. And if you notice, now my kind of manipulator here has changed its appearance. So if I hit D, it goes back to normal. If I hit D again, there's a little dot in the middle. Okay, so now I can move the pivot point to different parts of my scene. And now, if I rotate, it's going to rotate from that pivot point. Okay? Just reset it. However, if we're moving this around, we want to be really precise, like it could be anywhere in space. So what if we wanted to snap it to one of these corners, which are called verts? How would we do that? So now that we're in this mode where the pivot's active, if we hold down V, you'll see the cursor changes again. And up here, magnet lights up, right? So when I hold down V, it's snapped to vert. So now, when I move it, it's going to want to come to one of these corners, which is great. Okay? Then if I hit D again, now the pivot's in one of the corners. So now, if I want to position it on the floor, I can use another snap called X. Right, and over here, you can also just turn these on too, right? So this is snap to grid, snap to line, snap to point, right? I can just turn this on, and now with this on, it's going to go to one of these units. However, this is something you're going to be doing so often, just like I was showing you with the hotkeys for translate and rotate. You're going to be doing this all the time, so you're going to just hold down X whenever you need to snap to the grid, and V whenever you need to snap to a vertex. Okay? Let's delete that and start fresh. So I'm going to make a brand new one. What I want to do is have this cube, for now, centered right on this axis here. This is called the origin, where everything's at 0 is the origin. So to do that, I'm going to move my camera around to the front, maybe move down a little. Then I'm going to hit D, and instead of moving anywhere, I'm just going to grab the y-axis, so it can only move on the y-axis, and I'm going to hold down V. And then D again, and now my pivot is on the bottom, that bottom part of the cube, but it's perfectly aligned. Then I'm going to hold down X and move it to the floor. Okay, so now that we have one element, let's add some more. We'll make a little homage to the Bauhaus, but instead of triangle, circle, square, we'll do cone, sphere, and cube. All right, so the cone, click on the button. There it is. Once again, I'm going to hit D. I'm going to move the pivot down in the y-axis and hit D again. Then I'm going to hit X to snap it to the ground plane. And I'll move it over here. Maybe make it a little smaller. And then last we have the sphere. Same thing. D, V, D, and X. We'll scale it down. All right, so one thing to be on the lookout for is try to, now we're in 3D space, so it adds complexity to things. Try to make sure you're looking at it from the front and then it's triangle, circle, square. So that's one thing to compose. You can compose your scene from anywhere, and it sort of makes sense just to keep things as straightforward as possible and compose from the front. All right, and maybe I'll make this a little smaller, whatever. All right, so now let's render this thing out. So the render view is over here, this little eyeball. And I'll make my window a little bigger. And if I hit play, nothing happens. It calculated something, but nothing's there. And the reason for that is we don't have any lights. But if we cycle through the channels, which we can do over here, we can see that our items are there, but they're just sitting in the dark. So we need to add a light. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to say create light area light. I'm going to move it up. I'm going to rotate it towards our subject matter. One handy thing is you can hit T, where you can move, if you hit T, you can move the aim and the light, right? So the aim is where the light's facing. I'm going to show you a better way of positioning and controlling lights in a later video, but for now, this is okay. All right, and so let's see what's happening. If I click again, there's nothing there. If I turn up the juice, it's there. It's just the light is very dim. So now I'm going to go over to this new tab. So we've been playing with this is called the channel box, where you can see kind of many numbers at a glance. The attribute editor is where you kind of change the attributes of individual things. So what we're looking for, area light, and then Arnold, and I'm going to set the exposure to something like 10. If you want to see what's happening in your scene while you work, you can actually do that. So if I click this button over here, it will render as you work, which is really amazing, right? So as I update things, I can kind of work and light at the same time. And so I can move my light around. Okay. What other stuff? Make my light a little bigger. All right, right now it's in like an outer space kind of thing because there's no floor. So I'm going to turn this off for a second. To create a floor, click over here. Make it a little bigger. That's much, much better. Okay. What else? So right now, whatever size this window is how big the frame is, but what is it actually going to look like when it renders? So the first thing we want to do is set up our aspect ratio. And to do that, so we have the render view over here. We're going to go over to where this little movie cut thing and a little gear is, and that's the render settings. So we're going to get to all this, but for now, I want you to go down to the image size, and let's set this to be 1080 by 1080. Nice. Square. Then I can close that. And then to see this square in our scene, we can click on this resolution gate. And this will help us frame up our shot. Okay, so stuff that is catching my eyes. I don't want like a tangency with the background here. If we're thinking about this, this is just a test scene, but if we're thinking about this as a composition, our eyes go to contrast. There's more contrast here, so I need to create some sort of backdrop. The simplest way to do that is to make another plane. So maybe I just hit Command D, which duplicates this plane, rotate it up to camera. If I want it to be a perfect 90, I can just go over here. And then I can slide it back in space. Like so. So you'll notice when I'm moving this around, I need to kind of move the camera to move things and move around my scene and stuff. But what if I wanted to compose a shot? Then every time I move the camera, I lose my shot. So we need to do a new thing. So we're going to grab over here. So this thing is called the outliner. We haven't really looked over here yet. This is kind of an inventory of all the items in our scene. These cameras, perspective, top, front, and side, are called modeling cameras. So they're what we use to do our work, like our working cameras. But once we have a composition that we like, we want to have our own camera for that. So what I'm going to do, I can either create a new camera, or if I already kind of have a point of view I like, I can just grab the perspective camera and duplicate it. Okay, a good rule of thumb in any bit of software, as soon as you make something and it has a function, you want to give it a name. So we're going to call this background. We're going to call this floor. Okay, and then now we have shot cam. And down here, it's letting us know which camera we're using. If I want to look through my shot cam, I go panel, perspective, shot cam. And now I'm in the shot cam. And so now I can frame up my shot, but if I want to adjust things in the scene, I can go back to my perspective view and it won't mess up my shot. Okay, and so now back to the render view, hit render. I can zoom out the same way I can zoom in my scene. What other things am I noticing? The light is kind of getting cut off. So I'm going to keep my shot cam up over here. I'm going to go panel, perspective, and I'm just going to move the light. Click on it, hit T, just move it up so that we don't have that distracting moment. And maybe I'll make it a little bigger. And say something like that. And I'll go back over here. Zoom in a little. And just give it a little bit more intensity. Okay, so now we want to save both this image and this scene. So we could just save it, but there's actually a better way to work that will unlock a lot of functionality as we move forward. So to do that, you're going to go Project Window. You're going to create New Project. You're going to go over here to this folder, and then you're going to point where you want this project to go. So in the class, whatever. I'll put it in my Dropbox, let's say. And I have a folder for this class. Package design. Okay, so I'm selecting this folder, and then I'm going to call this triangle. This project is triangle, or maybe we'll call it learning Maya underscore. And then any Maya project I make, I like to just let myself know that it's a Maya project. Okay, so here's something new. When you work in Maya, Maya is kind of a hub, right? You can have images come in and out. You can have audio come in and out, movements, simulations, all kinds of stuff. And what this is where you want Maya to look for things by default. And the great thing about this is it keeps you organized. And if you ever go to a studio who's using Maya, it's a good kind of first step to see if they're using this convention, right? So I'm going to say accept. Now, when I go to save this scene, it's going to go automatically to the scenes folder. So see, look, blah, 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 learning Maya underscore scenes. So I'll make a new folder, triangle, circle, square. Copy this. So I want it to live in that folder. I'm going to use this name. Here's another new thing. So when we're naming files in Maya, it's good to give them a name, and you want to use this convention, .12340.mb. And what this is going to let us do is automatically increment and save in the future. Okay, so now I've saved my scene. It's over here. Next up, I want to save my image. I'm going to go File, Save Image. It automatically is going to go to the proper folder because we've set up a project. And I like to name my images after my scene. So triangle, circle, square. If I don't specify what file type, it will automatically save it as a JPEG. If I want to change the file type, I add it here, .png, and hit save. And then I go to the Finder. Let's try to find that quick as we can here. Type in space, package design, O2, learning my part. So there's all those folders again. I'm going to put this over here. Images. There it is. All right. There's way more, but let's just stop there.